How would the universe be affected if Darkseid had Brainiac's intelligence? In the DC Comics universe, Darkseid and Brainiac are two of the most feared villains, each representing a different aspect of the threat. Darkseid, the Lord of Apokolips, is the embodiment of supreme power, a new god with overwhelming physical strength, keen strategic abilities, and the ambition to rule the entire universe through the anti-life equation. Brainiac, on the other hand, is the symbol of superhuman intelligence, an artificial entity with information processing capabilities far beyond those of any living being, collecting knowledge from countless civilizations and storing it in his vast database. What if Darkseid, already a cosmic threat, possessed Brainiac's intelligence? Darkseid is not just a tyrant. He is a genius strategist, as shown in Justice League, where he manipulates Brainiac to serve his own ends. Brainiac, while incredibly intelligent, has inherent weaknesses. His rigidity of thought and arrogance make him vulnerable to someone as cunning as Darkseid. We'll delve deeper into the two characters' traits, incorporating Brainiac's intellect into Darkseid's. Darkseid, also known as Uxus, is the Lord of Apokolips, a hellish planet where he rules with an iron fist. Darkseid's powers lie not only in his physical abilities, such as his Omega Beam, which can instantly obliterate a target, but also in his psychological and strategic manipulation. He desires not only to conquer planets, but also to control the free will of all living things through the anti-life equation. In Justice League Unlimited, Darkseid demonstrated his cunning when he used Brainiac to attack New Genesis, the homeworld of the rival New Gods. Darkseid is not only physically strong, but also possesses a formidable strategic intellect. He is capable of predicting his enemy's movements, planning long-term, and manipulating both allies and opponents. However, Darkseid's intellect is pragmatic, focused on achieving his goal of domination. He is not interested in acquiring knowledge for its own sake, but rather uses knowledge to serve power. Brainiac, an artificial intelligence from the planet Colu, is the embodiment of logical and informational perfection. With the ability to store and process data from millions of civilizations, Brainiac can analyze any situation with near-perfect accuracy. However, as you pointed out, this intelligence comes with a rigidity. Brainiac often acts on pure logic, lacking the flexibility to deal with unpredictable factors such as betrayal or complex emotional motivations. As mentioned in Justice League Unlimited, Brainiac was easily manipulated by Darkseid. He believed that he was working with Darkseid to achieve a common goal, but in reality, Darkseid was using Brainiac as a tool. Brainiac's arrogance caused him to underestimate Darkseid, leading to his disastrous defeat. This shows that, despite Brainiac's superhuman intellect, he was no match for Darkseid's cunning and manipulative abilities. Brainiac has the ability to collect and store knowledge from millions of planets, making him a living knowledge repository. He can analyze data, predict the behavior of his opponents, and develop complex strategies in an instant. For example, in Superman, the animated series, Brainiac easily bypassed Earth's defense systems and even manipulated advanced technology to serve his purposes. If Darkseid had this intelligence, he would be able to process information faster, predict his opponent's moves more accurately, and develop more complex strategies. For example, Darkseid could use Brainiac's knowledge to find out the weaknesses of the Justice League members in greater detail, thereby planning to destroy them with maximum efficiency. Furthermore, with Brainiac's data vault, Darkseid can discover ancient technologies or weapons from destroyed civilizations, thereby increasing Apokolips' power. However, Brainiac's intellect is not perfect. As you can see, his rigidity and arrogance are his greatest weaknesses. Brainiac often acts on pure logic, lacking the flexibility to deal with unexpected situations. In Justice League Unlimited, Brainiac fails to anticipate Darkseid's betrayal, because he believes he is always in control. This arrogance makes Brainiac easy prey for cunning people like Darkseid. Darkseid is already a brilliant strategist, with the ability to manipulate and predict the psychology of his opponents. However, if his thinking is dominated by Brainiac's rigidity, he can lose the flexibility that is a key element of his plans. For example, in his battles with the Justice League, Darkseid often relies on surprise and adaptability to deal with unforeseen situations. Darkseid, as you have noted, possesses a genius-level intellect. He is not only strategically intelligent, but also has the ability to understand the psychology of humans and other living things. In Final Crisis, Darkseid nearly succeeds in using the anti-life equation to control all free will on Earth, a feat that Brainiac would have difficulty accomplishing. Darkseid's intellect is pragmatic, focused on achieving goals, while Brainiac's intellect is theoretical, focused on gathering and analyzing information. With Brainiac's intelligence, Darkseid could take his plans for conquest to the next level. While Darkseid is already a formidable strategist, He often relies on military might and psychological manipulation. With Brainiac's analytical abilities, he could more accurately predict the moves of the Justice League, the Green Lantern Corps, or even the New Gods of New Genesis. For example, Darkseid could use Brainiac's data to find weaknesses in Green Lantern technology, thereby neutralizing their powers. Furthermore, Brainiac's knowledge could help Darkseid discover new technologies or weapons. In Superman, the animated series, Brainiac used advanced technology to take over planets. If Darkseid had this ability, he could build a more advanced army that far surpasses the current parademons, or even develop weapons capable of destroying the multiverse. A Darkseid with Brainiac's intellect could change his approach to his goals. Currently, Darkseid typically uses overwhelming force and manipulation to achieve his goals. With Brainiac's intellect, he could switch to more sophisticated strategies based on data and analysis. For example, instead of attacking Earth head-on, he could use information from Brainiac to manipulate governments or superhero organizations from within, weakening them before he attacks. However, this change can also be a double-edged sword. Darkseid is known for his ability to create fear and psychological pressure on his opponents. If he becomes too dependent on logic and data, he could lose his original fear. For example, in Final Crisis, Darkseid relied not only on his strength, but also on his ability to instill fear and despair. Brainiac's rigidity could make him more predictable. For example, in Justice League Unlimited, Brainiac failed because he failed to anticipate Darkseid's betrayal. If Darkseid had Brainiac's intellect, he might have become overconfident in his analytical abilities, leading him to overlook unpredictable factors, such as Superman's indomitable will or the Justice League's unity. The Justice League, Earth's main defense force, will face an unprecedented threat. With Brainiac's intelligence, Darkseid can analyze each member's weaknesses, from Superman's physical strength, Batman's intellect, to Flash's speed. He can design strategies that target each individual, weakening the Justice League before they can react. For example, Darkseid could use Brainiac's data to create a weapon that neutralizes Green Lantern's energy, or a poison specifically aimed at Martian Manhunter. Furthermore, with his ability to manipulate information, he can sow doubt and division within the Justice League, weakening their unity. On Apokolips, Darkseid can use Brainiac's intellect to consolidate his power. He can modernize the Parademon army, build advanced war machines, and strengthen the planet's defenses. However, Brainiac's rigidity can cause internal strife. Darkseid's subordinates, such as Granny Goodness and Dazad, are accustomed to a fear-based leadership style. In New Genesis, Apokolips' arch-rival, Highfather and the New Gods will face a Darkseid more dangerous than ever. With Brainiac's wisdom, Darkseid may find a way to destroy New Genesis from within, instead of relying solely on frontal attacks like in Twilight. With Brainiac's intellect, Darkseid could expand his ambitions across the entire multiverse. He could use Brainiac's knowledge to search for ancient weapons, such as those of the Monitor or the Anti-Monitor, and thereby threaten all of reality. However, this expansion could also lead to new challenges. Cosmic entities, such as the Spectre or the Guardians of Oa, could recognize Darkseid's threat and intervene. Furthermore, if Darkseid becomes too dependent on Brainiac's logic, he could lose his ability to deal with metaphysical entities, such as the Phantom Stranger, who operate outside the realm of normal logic. Darkseid has proven that he does not need Brainiac's intelligence to be one of the most dangerous villains in DC Comics. In Final Crisis, he nearly destroyed all of reality with just the anti-life equation and psychological manipulation. Darkseid's abilities lie not only in his physical strength, but also in his cunning and ability to predict the psychology of his opponents. He knows how to exploit the weaknesses of his enemies, from Superman's loyalty to Batman's doubts. Compared to Brainiac, Darkseid has the advantage of flexibility. He is not limited by pure logic, but can adapt to any situation. In Justice League Unlimited, Darkseid took advantage of Brainiac's rigidity to turn him into a tool. This shows that Darkseid is not only intelligent, but also extremely cunning, a quality that Brainiac lacks. Darkseid, using Brainiac's intelligence, began by analyzing all of the Justice League's data. He discovered each member's weaknesses. Superman was vulnerable to kryptonite, Wonder Woman relied on her warrior spirit, and Batman relied on careful preparation. Using Brainiac's knowledge, Darkseid created a more powerful synthetic kryptonite, a psychological trap that targeted Wonder Woman, and a computer virus that disabled Batman's systems. He also upgraded the parademons with Brainiac's technology, turning them into nearly invincible fighting machines. Rather than attacking head-on, Darkseid used a subtle strategy. He manipulated Earth's governments, sowed doubt in the Justice League, and weakened their morale. However, the Justice League is not easily defeated. Superman, with his indomitable will, overcomes the effects of kryptonite. Wonder Woman, thanks to her loyalty to her ideals, breaks Darkseid's psychological trap. Batman, despite losing his computer system, still relies on his intelligence and resilience to find a way to deal with it. The rigidity of Brainiac's intelligence begins to show. Darkseid, too trusting in his data, fails to anticipate the unity and will of the Justice League. He begins to make mistakes, such as ignoring the role of supporting heroes, like Green Arrow or Zatanna, who are not included in his analysis. The Justice League exploits Darkseid's arrogance to strike back. Batman discovers a flaw in Brainiac's technology that Darkseid has been using, and Zatanna uses magic to break through Apokolips' defenses. Superman leads a frontal assault, defeating Darkseid in a final battle. While Brainiac's intellect gives him an initial advantage, his rigidity and arrogance eventually become Darkseid's downfall. He may achieve short-term victories, but in the long run, Darkseid's flexibility and cunning are more important. Darkseid, as the Lord of Apokolips, not only relies on physical strength or omega beams to overwhelm his enemies, but also uses psychological manipulation and long-term planning to achieve his goals. When Brainiac's mind is integrated, Darkseid will have the ability to process information on a cosmic scale. Brainiac, with his vast archive of data from millions of destroyed civilizations, can provide Darkseid with detailed information about technologies, the weaknesses of races, and even the ancient secrets of the multiverse. This can allow Darkseid to formulate more complex plans, such as developing a weapon that can disable the entire Green Lantern Corps, or a strategy to manipulate cosmic entities such as the Monitor or Anti-Monitor. Apokolips is now a formidable war machine, with its parademon army and technologies like the Boom Tube. However, compared to Brainiac's technological treasure trove, Apokolips is still relatively primitive. Brainiac once used advanced machines to collect and store all the knowledge of the planets, thereby creating weapons and defense systems beyond imagination. With Brainiac's intelligence, Darkseid could turn Apokolips into an impregnable technological fortress. He could integrate Brainiac's technologies into the parademon army, turning them into self-repairing, self-adaptive, and even self-evolving fighting machines. Furthermore, Darkseid could use Brainiac's data to recreate ancient weapons, such as ancient Kryptonian technology or devices from extinct civilizations, thereby enhancing his military power. However, his reliance on technology can also be a weakness. Throughout DC Comics history, Darkseid has relied more on psychological overwhelm and godlike power than pure technology. If he becomes too reliant on Brainiac's systems, he could become vulnerable to surprise attacks, like Zatanna's magic or the intervention of metaphysical entities like the Spectre. Darkseid is a tyrannical leader who rules Apokolips through fear and absolute power. His subordinates, such as Granny Goodness, Darkseid, and Steppenwolf, serve him not only because of his power, but also because of his intimidating personality. Brainiac's intellect, with its focus on logic and efficiency, could change this leadership style. Darkseid could begin to adopt data-driven management methods, such as analyzing the performance of his subordinates or optimizing Apokolips operations. This could increase the planet's efficiency, but could also cause discontent. Darkseid's subordinates, accustomed to leadership based on fear and violence, may not adapt to a Darkseid who is too rational. Darkseid, who is cunning and ruthless, may feel threatened by a Darkseid who relies on logic instead of instinct. This discontent could lead to betrayal or internal division, weakening Darkseid's power. While Darkseid poses a formidable threat with Brainiac's intelligence, the heroes of DC Comics are not without a chance. Furthermore, Brainiac's arrogance may cause Darkseid to underestimate supporting heroes, such as Green Arrow, Black Canary, or members of the Justice Society. These characters, while not as powerful as Superman or Wonder Woman, have the ability to create surprises that can disrupt Darkseid's plans. For example, in JSA, Justice Society of America, heroes like Jay Garrick, the original Flash, have proven that experience and courage can overcome technologically superior opponents. Combining Brainiac's intellect with Darkseid's would create an unprecedented threat to the DC Comics universe, from Earth, Apokolips, to the entire multiverse. However, it is Brainiac's weaknesses, his rigidity and arrogance, that are the keys to the hero's counterattack. The Justice League, the New Gods, and cosmic entities could use unpredictable elements, such as willpower, emotions, and magic, to deal with an enhanced Darkseid. Ultimately, as we've seen, Darkseid's true power lies in his cunning and versatility, qualities that Brainiac's intellect could weaken rather than enhance.